Hello and welcome to Stand Up, where each and every day I talk to the smartest people I can find for as long as they will let me. Today I've got the great Jeff Sharlet joining me, author, editor of 7 books, Dartmouth professor, his newest book, The Undertow, Scenes from a Slow Civil War. Of course, you can read him at Vanity Fair as well, where he's a contributing writer. Awesome conversation with Jeff about what's happening in the country, what's happening in media, politics, and culture, and he's just so brutally honest and so super smart. I love his take. Jeff Sharlet, my very special guest on today's episode of Stand Up. Oh, man. Let's get to what happened yesterday, though, huh? Can you believe it? What a game changer. The governor of New Hampshire, Jeff actually and I were talking about him, and then after we got done taping, we found out that the governor of New Hampshire has decided, his name is Chris Sununu, he is not going to run for president. How about it? He wrote an editorial in the Washington Post titled, "I'm not running for president in 2024. Beating Trump is more important." Okay, I am sure that's the reason. I mean, to some extent it is the reason, but that's okay because Cornel West has gotten in the race. Chris Sununu is out, and former Harvard, now Princeton professor emeritus, I guess, Cornel West is in, once a hero to the West and black scholars all over the country, a highly respected public intellectual, and now questionable, controversial in ways that are difficult to understand. I'll definitely be talking more about it with different guests here on the show because I don't really want to wade too much into it, but it's definitely more scary having Cornel West in terms of a threat than RFK Jr. So don't love to see anybody take in a couple percentage points away from Joe Biden that somehow puts Donald Trump back in serious contention for the White House. That, of course, is the big concern, but I don't want to concern anybody right now. Is a long way to go. Anything can happen. Let's not get too worked up about it, but certainly I think important to pay attention to at least. How about this from Miami? A Florida cop is facing child porn charges. He went to a party with police officers where children were present, despite a judge's order to stay away from kids. He remains free on bond, awaiting trial. And I saw that. I just have to read a tweet. I saw this guy at Nate Rock Quarry tweet. Tim Wise retweeted him. That every single day I see stories like this. Generally, preachers, cops, teachers, people in authority, never about a drag performer. It's never been about protecting the children. It's about justifying hatred of others. Yeah, hard to see it any differently than that. Certainly not understanding or even thinking about trying to understand others if I was being generous. And speaking of Florida and Ron DeSantis, or is it DeSantis? Cornel West once celebrated Ron DeSantis in a column that he co-wrote in the Wall Street Journal with a guy named Jeremy Tate. He said that Mr. DeSantis' support of classic education has universal merit that transcends partisanship. Education based on values, logic, and discipline isn't Republican. It's timeless. Yeah, so hard to understand what in the world is happening with that guy. What else do I think is important? How about this? Apple Computers on Monday unveiled what is being referred to as their most ambitious and riskiest new hardware product in years. It's a mixed reality headset called the Apple Vision Pro. Have you seen it? It looks like big virtual reality. It's got the big, it looks like you're wearing these ski goggles, basically. But the CEO called the Vision Pro, which combines virtual reality and augmented reality, as a, quote, revolutionary product with the potential to change how users interact with technology, each other, and the world around them. And it was a highly anticipated announcement coming from Apple at their Worldwide Developers Conference, where, of course, they announced a whole bunch of other things, too. I wonder if anybody in this audience pays attention to that conference for their interest or their work. But this headset thing is really interesting for the simple fact that it cost $3,500. So who's getting it and when? And how do we rob them? Apparently, people are going to watch movies on them as well, which is weird. I mean, I guess as long as you keep it on the privacy of your own home. My point is, if someone was walking around with a device like that, cost $3,500, and they couldn't see anything because they were wearing that, I guess you could see some things. It's augmented reality, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. I'm getting old. But the point is, that thing's getting stolen. That's all I'm saying. Hey, look, I got you a new pair of these Apple goggles. Oh, man, I thought they were $3,500. Yeah, yep, I've been saving up. Meanwhile, some poor kid's lying in a curbside somewhere because you took his goggles. I mean, it's just a bizarre price point. I guess I'll have to figure out why it costs so much and how they think they're going to make any money. Who's going to buy them, by the way? Apple also unveiled a whole bunch of other things if you care about it. Go to the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference is where to look. And the other big story, I guess, on Monday was that Trump's attorneys are met with the special counsel at the Justice Department amid the documents investigation. Everybody's speculating what the hell that meeting was all about. And Republicans are coming after Joe Biden over some FBI document, and there's a lot of confusion about this one. But this guy, James Comer, is the chair of the House Oversight Committee, and he was not satisfied yesterday with the closed briefing that they had with the FBI about a document purportedly describing an allegation that Joe Biden accepted a bribe as vice president, which would be a pretty big deal. So the FBI briefed Comer and Oversight Committee ranking member Jamie Raskin on Capitol Hill for more than an hour Monday and then offered them a chance to review a document that purportedly describes an allegation that Joe Biden accepted a bribe as vice president. So here's the Oversight Chairman, Republican James Comer, and Jamie Raskin, a little mashup from one of the cable news networks. I'll let you decide what you think.
I have to say about the ongoing investigation, did they say anything about the nature of it?
All I know is there's an ongoing investigation. They confirmed there's an ongoing investigation using this information. I assume that ongoing investigation is in Delaware. I don't know that, but I assume that.
Is it part of an ongoing investigation?
Comer said that it was part of an ongoing investigation, that's what he learned.
Okay. But then I must have missed that because I've not heard that this is part of any ongoing investigation.
What is the main reason they're not wanting to make this public is because they're concerned about the source, the highly credible, and I haven't read that in a lot of outlets, the highly credible source that's been with the Bureau since the Obama administration.
Yeah, there's a confidential human source that the FBI works with who has proven to be very credible, who reported a conversation with someone else. That confidential human source said that he had no way of knowing about the underlying veracity of the things that he was being told. And so it's not the source's information, it's the information that he reported from a conversation with someone else that he was not able to verify or authenticate, which is often the case. And that's why we're talking about secondhand hearsay here. And so it's not the source, the confidential human source, who is the origin of the particular claim. That confidential human source is the person who reported that someone else was saying this, and that's why this task force was created, which examined it and then determined there was no reason to move up the chain of investigative procedures.
Determined there was no reason to move up the chain of investigative procedures. All right, well, we're going to have to deal with that one probably for a while. They're going to Benghazi Joe Biden try to damage him with rumors and hearsay, but never any real direct evidence. It hasn't worked, I don't think, so far with any of these kind of corruption charges, this Hunter Biden stuff. It hasn't really made that much of a dent, in my opinion. Hard to know, but we'll see what happens. And that's all I guess we can talk about right now as far as it goes. Other than the fact that this is something that Republicans always do. And I guess Republicans would say the Democrats trump up charges against Republicans as well. But I would ask you where, when, what oversight hearing were they going after Republicans for crimes that never were committed by anybody, much less by them? Let me know. I'd be interested in hearing what those accusations would be. And finally, I saw that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Steve Bannon are breaking up. How about it? Oh, dear. It's hard to take, but she's become establishment. She's lined up with leadership to become leadership, it would seem. And Steve Bannon is threatening trying to primary her and apparently Jim Jordan. Imagine Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jim Jordan aren't extreme enough. Well, Steve Bannon's whole important job is to be controversial and to make money with his podcast and make connections through his podcast. As dirty as they come, old Steve Bannon, but still interesting to see him now be at war with some of the most extreme MAGA Republicans serving in Congress today. All right, well, that is what I've got for you in terms of news from yesterday. What did I miss? What should I mention? Send me your audio, and I will get it on. standupwithpete@gmail.com. And don't forget, I cannot do it without your subscription. So it is the very first week of the month. It'd be awesome to see some new subscriptions coming in. This is my main gig right now because I lost my other gig at least temporarily at last week tonight. I'm hearing that the strike, the writer's strike, is not going to be over till August, maybe at the earliest. Now SAG is about to go on strike as well. Not the Directors Guild, though. If you're interested, look into that there. They decided to negotiate something to benefit them so they can continue to do reality shows or something while the writers and actors are on strike, is at least how I interpreted it from what I saw the reactions to it. So it is tough for some of us out there. So if you can ante up, that'd be awesome. So many of you already do, and I am so grateful and appreciative of those who have been subscribing for over 3 years and for as much as they can afford. You guys are the greatest. But I do always have to ask, in case you aren't, in case there's new listeners that are liking the show, please send a subscription my way. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic or standupwithpete.com. All right. Now, let's get to Jeff Sharlet. I already introduced him, I think, pretty much, kind of. He is the author of, most recently, Scenes from a Slow Civil War, The Undertow, Scenes from a Slow Civil War. He's a New York Times best-selling author, editor of 8 books, including The Family, Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power, which is, of course, adapted into a Netflix documentary series. His reporting on LGBTQ rights around the world has received National Magazine Award, the Molly Ivins Prize, and the Outright International's Outspoken Award. His writing and photography have appeared in many publications, including Vanity Fair, the New York Times Magazine, GQ, Esquire, and more. And, of course, he is the Frederick Sessions Beebe Professor in the Art of Writing at Dartmouth College, where he lives up in the woods with many animals in his family. We love Jeff Sharlet, so let's do it right now. There he is, Jeff Sharlet, who was like, hey, man, what are we talking about? I'm like, just you agreeing to join me because anytime I get to talk to you is awesome and people love to hear your perspective on things. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Pete. I love talking to you, too. It always cheers me up and fills me with hope and inspiration. And I think that's what your show is about, is just lightening the load for everybody.
Well, I like to think that might be true, but, you know, as much as anything else, I really want to try to understand what's going on in the world and in our lives from the perspectives of people who I think are really smart. And you're obviously one of those people and have been for a very long time in the world of literature and journalism and culture. And certainly in my life, you've gained a lot of trust and credibility with lots of people around the country for sure. So I don't know. I just always think talking to you about anything.
Let me get serious. I do actually think that lightens the load. And I think there's this sort of more and more as we come into 2024, there's going to be this debate amongst people. You know, we heard it after 2020. Well, I'm exhausted. I can't pay attention to this stuff anymore. And that's not all of it, but that's one part of why you now must pay attention to it in 2024 again. We don't have the room for exhaustion, but it does lighten the load to share it, to look at the threats and also the possibilities. And so, like, I was sort of joking because, I mean, obviously we've never had like a light, self-care conversation. We talk about this sort of dark stuff and that term that's become the term of art now, doom scroll. But I don't think it's doom scrolling. I think doom scrolling is the opposite of what you do and what I try to do. It's actually sort of like, how do we find a path through this? We're not looking toward the doom. We're looking beyond it.
Yeah, I also sometimes wonder if this doesn't involve me as directly as it involves a lot of other people that might listen to the show or that I might be talking about. What I mean by that is I got together with like 15 of my high school friends this past weekend, and guys always want to engage me on politics and stuff. And I try not to do that because it's just not the place for it. And these guys, I don't think too many of them are really, I don't know their politics. They're all high school guys. I don't know all of them, but this one guy keeps engaging me, my friend Todd, and he at one point he just got exasperated and said, I just don't care. I don't understand why people get so exasperated by everything. Why it has to be such a big deal. Why do people care so much? And I thought about it for a little while. I was like, well, for me specifically, when I lost my job at SiriusXM, I lost my health insurance. That mattered a lot, Todd. Like, I was just trying to use me as an example, and I used another guy as an example. And he said, yeah, you make some really good points, but with all due respect to my friend Todd, the guy's got a lot of money, and he has a lot of stress, but it's not around that maybe, and things that maybe the system might prevent him. He's a straight white guy and, done well for himself. So what do you say to somebody who says, why do people care so much about these issues that Jeff Sharlet's writing about?
Well, I'll tell you stories. What I've noticed with the new book, I've been going out doing book events, and you go out to, a regular town or city somewhere, and then you go to New York, usually to Manhattan. And I've now done enough Manhattan events that I feel I can say conclusively that's the most conservative audience. By conservative, I don't mean right wing, right? I can go to a place and get a real right wing audience. But when I go to a place that maybe is under Republican governance, the people there who are not bubble people are under no illusions about what's happening. It's their school boards that are being targeted. It's their libraries that are being gutted. And keep in mind, beyond all the book bans, we're not paying attention to the way that just your town library is not getting funding anymore. Or, the librarian is just sort of like, what, I'm going to look for work elsewhere because this is dangerous. All those little things adding up. But I get to Manhattan, and I think of an event a little while ago, and the crowd is, they're hipsters. They're the older hipsters. That's what goes to book events, right? And this is the first time I've ever gotten that question. Do you think Joe Manchin is a way through for us all? Like, what planet are you on? And then suddenly the questions start coming, and everyone wants to find common ground. And this is the bubble protection that they have. And at one point, I got into a conversation with a very influential cultural figure who was arguing from the left that he says, you got to stop talking about cultural issues. He says, trans. I'm for trans rights. But, and I said, look, I hear you, smash capitalism, etc. But first thing people got to do is deal with a gun that's pointed at them. And he says, give me a break. Nobody here has ever had a gun pointed at them. So first I'm like, oh, okay. So you didn't read the book that you said you read. Gun pointed at me. But secondly, every trans queer kid in America, in a sense right now, including my own, has a gun pointed at them. When you're criminalized, and I've been thinking, can I use that word criminalized? So I'm talking to criminologists, scholars. They're like, yes, that is the proper term for what's happening to trans people in over 20 states now. When you're criminalized, when you're an adult trans person and suddenly you can't get health care. Like, what if New Hampshire said to me, I have a heart issue. We don't think that's real. You can't see your cardiologist. You can't have your heart meds anymore. Well, I'll probably make it. But, and they're saying that in Florida now, folks can't get their meds. They can't get their health care, and they're pushing further. And there's guys showing up with guns. So the guns literally are being pointed. And the delusion of the people in the bubble who thinks, well, it's terrible what's happening to those people. What does it have to do with me? Is the most ahistorical thing you can possibly say. Because fascism never says, whew, I'm full now. That's enough. Fascism comes for everybody. And it's coming for Todd. It's coming for Todd.
Well,
or maybe Todd's gonna have to choose his side. Which side are you on, Todd? And frankly, if you're saying, well, I'm kind of in the middle, if you're not in this way, I said this to you before, like, which side are you on? Are you in there's a library with a drag time story hour? Well, I don't know. Do we really have to have drag time story? Whatever. It's there. There's kids and there's men outside with AR-15s. Which fucking side are you on?
Yeah.
If you can't choose a side in that, then you have chosen a side in that.
Very well said. We've done a really great job.
All right, now your friend Todd's going to listen to this and like, why did you invite this guy on to yell at me, Pete?
Well, you didn't yell at him. You gave him a choice, and I think we handled it well. And he will be, if you know him, he'll be really excited that I mention his name, put it that way, and that you mention his name. He'll go probably buy all your...
Todd, I'm looking forward to you to making the right choice, and I know you will. I have a total confidence in you.
It's great.
Any friend of Pete's.
I'm glad I used his first name. Okay, so we've made a lot of progress at our school board. We've been winning. We won 2 election cycles in a row. I've been following closely what's going down in Florida. They just beat back the crazy Moms for Liberty in a fairly not suburban rural area in Hernando County. I think that when people get engaged and pay attention, there's so many more people who aren't extreme, who aren't fascist, even though the fascist people don't know that they are, but who don't want to see what we're seeing these people try to do in our schools and in our libraries. And so that's why I think it does matter to get engaged, because I truly believe there's a lot more, I call them Earth One residents or quote normal people. I don't think they're progressives or anything. I think they don't.
Normal. Earth One works.
Okay. I don't think they want books.
Because partly because the fascists are attacking queer folks and now increasingly neurodivergent folks on the very basis that they aren't normal. And some of them, you know, my kid is not normal. I love my kid. They're brilliant. They are proudly not normal. And that's part of why our school district is under attack. They want a list of all the not normal kids, right? But Earth One, I'm with you. And the fact that you can, like, you know, that county in Florida. So it's a little bit both ways. A report I'd urge you to check out. It's on Vanity Fair by my friend Catherine Joyce on Sarasota. And she's really done the deep dive on Sarasota, which was Florida's really kind of one of the top school districts in the country. And it's just being gutted and destroyed. So you can, and it's also very wealthy, right? So you can beat them. You have to show up. And I think people, like, that's again the answer for Todd. Like, you know, it will come for you unless you show up now, Todd. Maybe then it'll never come for you, right? But the other thing I would say, though, is that line, I'm just going to push back because we're always sort of saying, well, there's more of us than them. Yeah, but they're an anti-democratic movement. They're not saying, oh, gosh, well, really, we lose the majority vote. I guess it's like all fascist movements, none of which have come to power with a majority. We can beat them, but we should not take the simple solace and the idea that we outnumber them.
Fully agree. No, that's very that's more nuanced.
They are going to break the rules. That it is an ideology that is based on transgressing rules. Like you're not doing it unless you're smashing shit.
Yeah. I'm to make it even less scholarly and minimize it. It's the only thing that matters is winning.
Yeah,
smashing, winning. So I don't care what the outcome of the election is. I don't care who the candidate is. I don't care how much money. We will find a way, legally or in this case, I guess we're talking about illegally, to deny the election results, to use money in a way that's illegal or inappropriate or dark, not transparent, to win at all costs. And we've certainly seen that in government. I don't know about at the school board and in a library. And I take your point for Florida. Certainly, I'm not saying we're winning everywhere. I'm saying we win.
No, you're right. We can win. It can be done.
I'm saying we're more likely to win when we get engaged. And I will argue, and I hope I'm right, but if you've got examples or if anybody listening does, let me know, that as of now, so far, that we haven't really seen too much election turmoil in terms of the outcome of the elections at the local level. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's a lot harder to do, and I think it's a lot easier to get caught, and I think it's not worth it. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. And, another book event I did was in Schenectady, New York, where I'm from. This is upstate New York. Schenectady itself is sort of blue, but it's red upstate New York.
Yeah.
And they had school board challenges for all the districts, and they did beat them back with real fighting, right? I mean, no one in Schenectady was under a delusion that this wasn't coming for them. They had to fight to hold on to their school boards. They lost one district, and that district's now going crazy. And like, what can we do about that? So we see what would have happened if we hadn't fought. But that said, I think part of what's giving us a false sense of calm right now, and I don't want to be a Cassandra because I do think we can get through it. I truly am optimistic, but we're not seeing as much of the electoral fighting because we're also seeing a massive centrifuging of American life. And, that's sort of a theme of the undertow. I begin in Sacramento, California with a young right-wing couple who are moving inland, maybe Oklahoma. They're getting out of California. And I end in New York and Palmyra, New York with a a family of 4, they're moving inland. They won't even tell me because as media, who knows, they're moving inland. And I think to understand this is like, think about like the history of manifest destiny, right? The westward expansion, which is grotesque and imperial, like this is that America has a right to the whole continent. The United States has a right to the whole continent. There's a weird contraction going on now, which is literally folks moving away from the shores. I think about like Orange County, say, look at Orange County, it's turning blue, as Bradley Onishi writes in his book. He grew up in the evangelical world of Orange County, was part of that church world. Everyone he went to high school with has moved to Idaho, the Great Redoubt, they call it. So there's a separating out that makes the elections look a little calmer, but they're not. And with our electoral system, that's not something we can afford, right? With the Electoral College, that's not going to work for us. Then we see on top of that, great reporting from NPR of all places on their Saturday report, a long report on this program called ERIC. Did you see this?
No.
It's boring stuff. It's how you make sure someone doesn't get to vote in 2 states. It's a voter, it's like just a thing that everybody used to like. It works. It's a system to keep the vote fixed. Well, prominent Trumpers decided it was a conspiracy, and now they've pulled 8 states, including Florida, out of it, right? So suddenly now those elections, will they be messed with? We won't know. We won't know.
I'm seeing that now. Never even heard of it. How the far right tore apart one of the best tools to fight voter fraud.
It's a fascinating report. I really recommend it to folks because I didn't know about it either. And it also is like, oh, look, here's media doing wonky, boring reporting instead of fucking horse race stuff going on. Like, I listen, MSNBC, it's like MSNBC is doing an ad for DeSantis. Will DeSantis's achievements be able to outpace Trump? I'm like, achievements? What do you mean? Do we count it by the number, the increase in queer suicide in Florida? Is that an achievement? Give me a break. So like when I see that reporting, I like to call it out.
This is really
interesting because I'm an optimist.
A deeper look at the red state exodus that followed. 8 states and counting have pulled out of ERIC shows a policy blueprint for an election denial movement spearheaded by a key Trump ally eager to change virtually every aspect of how Americans vote.
Her. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to have to look more into that. Where else do you find optimism?
You thought I was joking when we were talking before about being an optimist, and I sort of am because my optimism probably doesn't look like other people's optimism. I think we're going to go. I think some of us, maybe not you and me, Pete, are going to come out on the other side in this better and more interesting world. But I think there's going to be tremendous suffering on the way there. We may go through full fascism, or it may just stay at a simmer. But I do think we will come through it, and I think the apocalyptic thinking that fascism wants us to embrace, and that all too often those of us on the left or liberals also accept. Like, if we don't do this, it's all going to end. And with climate, that suddenly becomes more urgent. But we do have to remember the world is literally not going to end. We may end. You and I may end. There is a sort of ongoing story that's. I do think that. I don't want to say, I hate it when people say, well, this is just the last gasp of white supremacy. No, it's not. No, it's not. This is a new white supremacy breathing in, right? This is not something old expiring. This is a new formation pulling in Frankenstein like the old bits of fascism. I still think it's going to collapse. And don't you just get like a little joy out of seeing them turn on one another? Paxton and Texas and now the Trumpers and the DeSantians tearing each other apart. It gives you some happiness, and not because it reminds you that's what fascism does. We like to talk on the left like how the left is a circular or whatever firing thing. Yeah. But fascism is about clawing each other down, not out of ideological purism, but out of the will to power. And the will to power is handling them up right now. And that's encouraging.
I feel like when people talk about the last gasp of white supremacy, a lot of times they're alluding to the fact that a lot of white folks that feel the way that they feel, that are white supremacists, that are terrified of diversity, are older and they're on their way out. Do you think that there's a new crop, a new generation of white supremacists? I mean, we see them out there, these groups, these patriot fronts and their stupid khakis and all that. But I mean, are they gaining membership? Are they gaining ground? Is their ideology have a lot of momentum with young people? Maybe I'm misdiagnosing what people mean when they say the last gasp of white supremacy, but we're becoming a far more diverse country racially. That's inevitable, I feel.
And that's one of the arguments of the book, too, though. As I travel around and look at fascism, you know what else is becoming far more diverse? Fascism. And that should be obvious to us. It's a global fascist movement, and you know, the fascist movement in the Philippines and in China, and these are not white fascist movements, although they do have elements of white supremacy. Fascism is informed by white supremacy. But, you know, I look at the Latinx section of fascism and the fact that I think we've talked about this before. You go to a Trump rally in Florida, it's not just Cuban Americans,
right?
Nicaraguan Americans, Venezuelan Americans. It's fascinating that DeSantis keeps picking on these Venezuelan migrants because most of them are coming from they're most, and I think they should be welcome because they are fleeing oppression. They are also mostly right wingers. I've talked to a number who have sort of QAnon kind of thoughts about their own dictatorship government back home, which is an ostensibly left dictatorship government. They say is practicing cannibalism, all that kind of QAnon stuff. But there's been massive growth in that front. There's been not massive, but real growth amongst black men in terms of the attraction of fascism. There's been growth amongst queer folks. And I think that's part of why they realize the trans issue is so effective for them, is because you can get turfy, trans exclusionary radical feminism is a term, but really means folks who consider themselves liberal, but when they talk about the right of trans people to exist. If you can say but and engage with a question of, does this person have a right to exist? Now you're not on a slippery slope. You are falling down the rabbit hole. And we've seen it happening again and again. So this idea that, it's just a bunch of old Fox viewers is delusional. There's been some reporting in the New York Times too recently saying that it turns out that the younger generations have moved right over the last 10 years too. So it's as long as I've been alive, Pete, I've been hearing that the children are the future and they're going to save us and they're not going to put up with this crap. And so far, just like our generation did, every generation has. You cannot wait for demographic change to defeat fascism. You have to go out and do it. That's giving us old white people an excuse. Well, don't worry. The younger people are more diverse and more progressive than us. They'll take care of us and I can just, plan my retirement fund. No.
Love it. I'm just writing down a note because I got to clip that quote out as well. Last night, I don't know if you watched it. I don't know what you were doing last night, but I was watching Jake Tapper talk to Nikki Haley. I wasn't. I saw the clips.
I saw the clips.
So she said at one point, talking about the issue of trans issues, and she conflated that with suicide. And she said, how are we supposed to get our girls used to the fact that biological boys are in their locker rooms? And then we wonder why a third of our teenage girls seriously contemplated suicide last year. We should be growing strong girls, confident girls. And in a statement to NBC News, she doubled down on her comments apparently. So she didn't misspeak. I would go ahead and say everybody that knows anything about adolescents who are confused about their sexual identity, much less their gender identity, knows that there is a lot to worry about in terms of self-harm and, of course, suicide. Everybody knows that trans kids are, people are taking their lives at ridiculously disproportionate rates to non-trans people. I would go ahead and say that there's nobody. I'd say that there's almost no child who took their life because of a trans kid in the locker room. Like, if it happened, it happened once. Like, I can't imagine any experts agreeing to that, seeing that in schools. That's the reason. We know that there's a lot of reasons why adolescents are struggling, why adults are struggling, but it's not this. And she attributed it a third. She said, we wonder why a third of our teenage girls are seriously contemplated suicide. What? Jeff, you've been on this issue for a long time. How dangerous is that kind of comment? How do you react to that?
That's an exterminationist comment. It really, truly is. And what I saw that clip too. I saw it when another CNN person, I think Abby D. Phillip, posts the clip without comment.
Yeah.
And we're just reporting that town hall. They managed to actually make a town hall worse than the Trump town hall. And that was a big feat. The Trump town hall was ridiculous. They shouldn't have done it. They attempted to fact check whatever it was. I actually like Jake Tapp all right. He doesn't interrupt and say, excuse me, what are you saying? Or follow up. And then they start putting it out there and saying, here's a clip. USA Today columnist is chastising me. Well, what do you want them to do? Editorialize? And I'm like, well, that's not editorial. When you stand there silently while someone lies, you are editorializing on behalf of that lie. CNN endorsed that lie. Later that night, they put 8 takeaways from Nikki Haley's town hall. This didn't include one of the takeaways. They did include a takeaway, though. A really important thing we want to learn from the town hall. She has a really supportive husband. That's a takeaway. That's a takeaway, Pete. You can think about that. And then she says, I'm a lucky girl. They quote her, I'm a lucky girl. You know who's not a lucky girl? All the trans girls who are being targeted on national television without any pushback from CNN. But more than that, every single girl, that third of our girls who have considered suicide, Nikki Haley doesn't give a fuck about them because she just used them as a political prop and lied about them. And they have real issues that are bringing them to suicidality. And it is not the trans kid who may be in a locker room somewhere, right? A third, this is an obscene, transparently QAnon level lie coming from Nikki Haley, who's been delivering them all along, and she's still being presented as normal. Remember when she said 90% of our school children, our kindergartners, are under the authority of CRT? I'm like 90%, and I think we joked about this before. Like, how can I get my kids into this program? This is amazing. College level work in kindergarten. This is amazing. And with those poor 10%, how are we leaving them behind? That was obscene white supremacist remarks. And when we talk about the aging out, the old white folks, the imagination of the trailer, you want to look at the face of white supremacy right now? One of them is Nikki Haley, and it's a woman of color. And I know I'm saying that. She is speaking white supremacist. Oh,
it's just so not controversial. I've got the talking point down now. Brown people can uphold white supremacy. They have forever, for any number of reasons. Women can uphold patriarchy. They have forever, and it's not controversial. It's history.
It's almost they can't not. If this is systemic, it is infectious. It's contagious. Like, I don't want to think of myself as misogynist, but it's in me because I alone can't say, well, here's this huge system, but I stand alone and I've defeated it, right? I can struggle against it. But you say it's non-controversial, but then look at the fucking coverage. I'm sorry, I'm cursing so much today. Look at the coverage Tim Scott is getting. The serious take that the mainstream media is saying Tim Scott can't be racist. And it's banal. It's banal, I mean, like CRT, this is like, you're not going to get through a decent college freshman course thinking like that, right. Which is why, of course, they're targeting colleges, right? Because they know that. That's where you learn that if you haven't figured it out by the time you get there.
Well, I'm not sexist because I'm married to a woman and I have daughters. So.
Yeah, that's right. So you are cured. That's amazing. Hey, Pete, do you have a black friend?
I like to say I had 2 black roommates in college, so I'm not racist.
Oh my God, you're good. You're good,
yes.
Man. You are inoculated, and I think it is astonishing. I think a term that has fallen out of use, thank God, is post-racial. But the media is still doing the post-racial dodge,
Yes.
right? Of dealing with the white supremacy that has come. When Nikki Haley said that, it should have been the equivalent, either of those comments, the one about CRT or that, it should have been the equivalent of David Duke entering the room, right? And if you're not going to do that, but what was interesting is that CNN not only didn't do that with Nikki Haley, they actually walked backwards.
Yeah.
Their already weak T position with Trump. They actually did less.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about vis-a-vis, I guess, CNN is this big Atlantic report by Tim Alberta on Chris Licht. And it's not only Chris Licht, but there's a lot of people saying and thinking this, that we haven't heard from certain voices. Conservative voices get drowned out in mainstream media and so on. I forget the exact quote, but like he went for it. We've been hearing this for a really long time. Jeff, at this point, I don't know how anybody can necessarily think that. We know exactly what they think. There's no question about what they think. You traveled the country asking them what they think. So many journalists have done such great work covering this in so many different angles. What do you say when the CEO, a media executive makes that kind of comment in 2023?
It's just so cynical and disingenuous. I mean, it's not, it's worth noting Tim Alberta himself comes from a conservative background. I don't know where he identifies himself now. He accepts a lot of the conservative premises in the article as givens, but then says Licht didn't really do it. So that article is not actually the big pushback that I think it's being celebrated as. It's just that Licht is so damn bad that it comes through. But I think the other thing is conservative voices. Exterminationism is not a conservative voice, right? Denying the existence of humans. That's not conservatism. You want a conservative voice? Get Charlie Sykes on from the Bulwark. That guy is deeply conservative, right? He's a never Trumper. We would disagree with him on most everything. Fortunately, we're both on the same side of not eliminating people from society, right? What there is and should be some pushback on exterminationist voices. Matt Walsh is huge, right? Matt Walsh has the following that CNN could say, well, we just have to include him. He's part of the conversation. They don't, and they shouldn't. As an exterminationist voice, right? But this idea, this is ridiculous. I can go to MSNBC, and I can, as I said, I can hear these sort of like campaign ads for each of the Republican candidates. The conservative voices are there. Tell me about the left voices that are on CNN, because I haven't heard any. I've heard some liberal voices. Every now and then we'll get a Bernie type. That's as far left as they go.
Yep. It's always been the case. It's always been the case. It's why I hate it when they're called liberal or leftist, radical leftist CNN. I'm like, what are we then? So when you say exterminist, what do you mean by that?
I mean, let's go back to what's his name at CPAC, who got the biggest cheer of the event, who for saying we have to eradicate transgenderism. And then he follows up and says, I wasn't calling for killing anybody. I said calling transgenderism. Well, if you have trans people, you can't eradicate transgenderism. So that is an eliminationist rhetoric. The black flag that I write about in the book that we see more and more of. Now there's a couple around my house in Vermont, all black American flag, which stands for no mercy, no quarter in the coming Civil War. Kill them fucking all.
I just saw one in my town for the first time, and I didn't know what it meant.
I'm wondering, Trump's lawyer was on TV the other day, and someone on Twitter, and I don't know his real name, he calls himself Airbag Moments. So I'm giving credit to Airbag Moments, but does a zoom in and sees that his lapel pin is an all black American flag.
Nah.
Now, you see that flag sometimes on trucks because dudes think it's cool. It doesn't actually mean that. He looks up the pin, he tracks it down. It's from a supplier called Assault Gear or something like that. And it's framed as a flag that you wear if you don't want to be flamboyant. I don't know. That's a little weird. Like you're a patriot, but you don't actually want to. I thought those colors don't run. I don't know if it was an exterminationist flag on the Trump lawyer. That seems hard to believe. And on the other hand, remember Hannity was for a while wearing a Punisher skull, which looks a whole lot like the German Totenkopf skull.
Well, a lot of police officers wear those. well.
They do. And you go back into the history, you see Marvel has just done away with that character. They have even Frank Miller, the creator of the character, who is himself. When I call Frank Miller a fascist, hey, look, I love his work, his art, but he's the real Lenny Riefenstahl of comics.
Oh, wow.
But he is a fascist, and he's fairly open about that. But even he says, look, that's not what that character means. But at a certain point, this is like New York Times has a piece today that'll, if you haven't seen it, will blow your mind. It's about the Nazi symbols in the Ukrainian military, right? And they're trying to split the difference, as if it can't be simultaneously true that there are fascist elements in the Ukrainian military and still Russia is the aggressor. Like, I'm still on Russia's side because God, take that out. I'm still on Ukraine's side. I'm never on Russia's side in this. But the article actually says these symbols are complicated. For instance, like the Confederate flag, which some insist is a symbol. And it's just, we haven't seen that rhetoric for a while. We're going to see it more around Nikki Haley because she's going to brag that she took the flag down. She didn't take the flag down. A black woman named Bree Newsom took the flag down by climbing up and taking the goddamn flag down and then receiving death threats for it, right? That's how that flag came down. But we're going to see this debate. So, like, you talk about the Patriot Front. Who the hell cares about the Patriot Front? Except the fact that there are a few more of them, but they're not the threat. They're not the threat. Chris Licht, that's the threat. You want to see the face of white supremacy, Chris Licht.
Why do you say that? Because of the way that he's running that company and the voices that he's...
I don't think he's like some stealth Nazi. I imagine he really understands himself as a liberal guy, understands Trump as a problem. But white supremacy is a system. It's not things that you scream on Twitter, right? I mean, this is something I write in the book, too, when I run into a group of Proud Boys who swarm me. And then one other guy says, they're bumping their chest against me. Another guy says, don't worry, I vetted him. Well, he doesn't know anything about me. We talked for 2 minutes. All he knows is I'm a white guy. So vetted. And I'm sort of making fun of this. And then I write him back. I'm half white, according to a neighbor I have up here in Vermont, Nazi Ralph, who I don't use that figuratively. He's got swastikas tattooed all over himself. He's done the work, he's earned it. Nazi Ralph, who says he knows I'm a half Jew. He says, but I talked to you because you're half white, right? And the irony, though, is Nazi Ralph with his flags and his guns and his swastikas, he's less a part of white supremacy than me. With my deep opposition to it, me with a white guy at doesn't matter what I am, this college that I'm speaking to you from, Dartmouth College, I'm part of this larger system that is reproducing this. I get real estate. I'm arguably a bigger part of the problem. Now, it doesn't mean that the solution to that is that I must, go off into the desert and wear a hair shirt. But it means that the temptation we have to count actual Nazis with shields and red flags and say that problem is this big is delusional. I mean, the Patriot Front or Clarence Thomas, who's doing more work on behalf of white supremacy?
Yeah.
You tell me.
Yeah, no, that's the Supreme Court is doing a tremendous amount. This is why, I've been focused on it for years and years now. Not only the Supreme Court at this point, but lower courts as well, federal courts. And obviously, we can talk about the courts all day in terms of white supremacy. But let me ask you about the rest of the field. There's now a whole bunch. There's going to be like 12 Republicans running. Does it matter? What does that say to you? Not to mention, Trump's legal issues that, he's going to be indicted, it would seem, any day now. How do you think this summer plays out? How do you think this Republican campaign plays out? And why? Where's my boy Mike Pompeo? Come on, Pompeo. I'm going to lose money on my prediction.
Mike Pompeo, one of the reasonable guys in the room. People forget that before, when he was back in a congressman, do you know how Mike Pompeo rose to fame besides what appears to be very corrupt money from coke? He was on the radio talking about how the Muslims are trying to poison wells in small towns in Kansas.
No way. I never heard about that. He's from Kansas.
Michelle Goldberg did some reporting on that for Slate. You go back to Mike Pompeo's been out there. And the irony is, you dig deeper, who the hell poisoned wells in Kansas? Literally, Mike Pompeo. through his, pollution, toxic
Wow,
waste.
I see it now. Mike Pompeo's views on Muslims keep coming up in his confirmation hearing. Here's one piece from when he was Secretary of State. He also ran the CIA. This is always one of the most terrifying people. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, I would like. All right. I know your listeners don't know my background. There for a long time, I'm one of these people. I can't stand it when the left calls everything fascist. No, George W. Bush wasn't a fascist. Mass killer, yes, but he wasn't a fascist. No, Mitch McConnell is not a fascist. He's a stirrup holder, as the Germans would have called it, was the term for the enablers. But he's not a fascist. But I want a special filter that you can put on horse race coverage. And so it would just bleep out the name, whatever name you're talking about. In Iowa, fascist is squaring off with fascist. But will fascist come from behind? Because that really is it. Chris Sununu, arguably the least fascist of these candidates, governor of mine in New Hampshire, right? Now, he says, I'm getting this race because we got to stand up to Trump. But if he's a candidate, I certainly will support him. I mean, tomatoes, 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Right.
If you say, I'm against fascism unless it wins, then I'm for it. The word for you then, my friend, is a fascist, right? And I think that's the horse race coverage now is just really ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think also it's kind of astonishing because the Washington Post started off, they've got their democracy desk now, which is smart.
Yeah.
They decided they made the turn to saying Trump is authoritarian. They won't go for the F word, but they will say he's running an authoritarian campaign. We are watching in real time just the collapse, the delight of 12 candidates and like who's up, who's down, who's hot, who's not. And all the old critiques of that from civic standards are pushed aside because, I mean, to me, trans issues are at the front, not because they're the only thing there, because that's the point of the spear that fascism is. It's
so crazy.
Right now. So if you got any candidate who cannot speak forcefully against eliminationist rhetoric, then you can say that person is separate. You can use that person's name. It's fascist, and Joe Schmo who won't sign off.
Right. You don't have any, but you don't have any candidate.
No. This is. And the idea that there's a race is kind of silly. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, maybe Trump keels over from a heart attack or whatever. The crazier things can happen. There's no race between an ideology here. There's a slight race between style, but there is no ideological race here. So that's nothing for us to discuss then as politics followers.
The word that gets used the most, DeSantis, he refused to tell us even how to say his name. He said the word woke like 8 times the other day in Iowa. Nikki Haley was asked, by Jake Tapper, what does that word mean to you? And I think she went right to the trans issue. It is such a winner, Jeff Sharlet, the trans issue for them. I mean, we've seen this playbook over and over. I remember it when it was called Sharia. But man, this one is different because it's so much less like there is no threat from trans people, and they're making it seem like the worst threat we've ever seen. And they're really, I mean, I don't know how to think about it other than I wish we had something. I wish that worked in other people's minds.
No, we don't. We don't want the fascist rebuttal. But like, I think it is going through a cycle. There's 2 things going on there, right? Remember when Nixon deliberately decided to use heroin and marijuana as code, right? By heroin, he wanted voters to understand he meant black people. By marijuana, he wanted voters to understand he meant hippies. By woke, what they mean is I want you to understand everything you hate, queer folks forefront right now, but that includes black folks too and everything else. That's woke is it's not a dog whistle. It's just the term, right? But the trans issue, if you look back at the history of sex panics in the United States, right? And remember, there's a sex panic around gay men when they're going around the country shutting down bathhouses, and it becomes a terror. And they follow the same routine where Republicans try this issue, this issue, this issue. And you know what people care most about? Their genitals. They look down at their own crotches like animals. And that's the thing that matters most, right? Oh, no, it's the economy, stupid. No, it's not. I mean, you tell me, Pete, what do you think more about, like, your financial stuff or your own body, right? We're more attentive to our own bodies than our finances. And that's why it's working. And then we see these idiot polls. They really are dumb. That says, like, X number of people want them to talk about serious issues. Because who answering the survey is going to say, that's right. Yes, I'm high-minded. I follow foreign affairs. That's the thing I care most about. Or the economy. I'm deeply invested. I know all about tariffs. But they come back to it. What? There's a guy with a dick in the locker room. Now they've got it, right? And that terror and the fear that it could be your own child. And the reality is there has been an explosion in queer identifying and trans identifying youth. They want it. So it's easy for them to say it's contagious. The reality is we know there's just more and more people like, oh, I could do this. All right. This is who I am. So instead of like squishing myself into a bottle for my whole life, I could be myself. So the fear that these people have, not that trans people are going to hurt them, but they have a fear if it's getting now to like 20% of the young generation, like, oh, my child, there's not a bad chance that my child is queer, right? Well, that's the threat to me. I'm okay with someone else's kid, but not my child, right?
Right.
So they are dealing with a real threat in the sense of the thing they are afraid of. It is there. It's not something to be afraid of, but it is there.
All right. What else did I want to ask you? You covered a lot of the things that you've been writing about. I've certainly been tweeting about just now, which I'm really happy because you've been on fire lately. You always give me a different way to look at things that I just didn't see, especially when it comes to reporting and the framing of things and what gets covered and how it gets covered. You're a really, I always love to get your perspective on that. You've been doing really good work on that. So are there any more that I missed of you taking issue with someone's reporting on something that we didn't cover? Because I love that shit.
My wife, who is not on any social media, never has been, but is sort of very good at coming up with really sharp, cruel zingers that would make awesome tweets, has this character in her mind called Crankstock. And she someday, if you ever see an anonymous Twitter account called Crankstock, it means she's finally caved in and she's given in. And Crankstock is always writing letters to the editor. And Crankstock is mad about everything. And so you're asking me if I've got any more Crankstock in me. I don't know, wait till the next CNN town hall.
Yeah.
I do think that I've also done a number of events with mainstream media reporters now. And I guess I say mainstream. It's like setting myself up like I'm like the Rebel Alliance or whatever. I mean, I write for Vanity Fair. It's not like I'm coming out from the fringes in that regard. But one of the things that is striking me and is dismaying is that I am hearing a lot of off-air, out-of-print acknowledgement of how fucking serious the situation is that I am not seeing reflected on air in print. And, I do think that's the other way for people to be engaged. Go to your school board, but be a Crankstock. It's now as really as the time. Yeah. Letters to the editor and like tweeting and shit. Like they don't, it's not like it's like saying like, your vote's not going to make a difference. Your tweet's not going to make a difference. But I think there will be enough pushback against the Times today saying, well, maybe the Confederate flag is a symbol of pride. I think they're going to back off that. They know that they fucked up with that. And I think that's actually fairly vital work right now.
Yeah, no, I think it does matter. You're saying at the local level, your letters, your voice, it does matter. And I've certainly seen
at the national level. I think being pissed at the New York Times and CNN.
Sure.
Like, would that Tim Alberta story exist if a lot of people weren't saying, what the hell is happening with CNN, right?
I think, by the way, I think this, I know Chris Licht. I interviewed him. I worked at the CBS Late Show. I think part of the reason
he's a nice guy.
No, he's not a nice guy.
Oh, he's not a nice guy. Okay. All right. So tell us, what's the real deal with him?
Nobody likes him. He's an alpha. He comes into the room and I mean, my favorite story, I've got only one really, but it was like so emblematic. I mean, I've been doing comedy and media and entertainment for forever. And he did the weirdest thing where he was the, top guy producer at the Late Show, the Colbert, showrunner, I guess. And he knows me because I interviewed him for his book that he wrote about when he almost died of an aneurysm. We had a really thoughtful interview about that. He was still at MSNBC at that time. So he sees me and I'm just in there subbing as the warm-up comedian. And he says to me, "You better be good." And no one does that, Jeff. People like other comedians might do that to get in your head. But if like you're the producer of a show, you don't threaten or intimidate the talent because it
undermines the talent.
Yeah, it undermines. But it's not about ego. It's like, do you want if you're the coach, you want to do good. That's not what you do. Right. And I mouthed off to him like immediately. I reacted to that. I was like, well, if I'm not good, that'd be a reflection on you because you're the reason I'm here. Like, what do you mean? Like you're not good. Like, don't let me down. I've been doing this forever. I said, I've been doing this so long that I'm the best. So you don't even have to worry. Like I gave an over cocky answer, but it was like, that's how he is in every room that he is in. He minimizes, he marginalizes. He's, he's a jock. He acts like a jock in the locker room and it's immature. And it's like, I've heard that over and over from the guy. He's not well liked. And it's what's weird is that he's like Jeff Zucker was well liked and he's not a great guy either, obviously. But like he compared to Licht, like people are like, we want Zucker back, that arrogant prick. We want him back to anything. But this guy, he's
what do you think is like earlier you said, it's winning at any cost. And I started like, this is a thing I feel like has changed in our lifetimes. And it is the sportification of everything. Right. And I almost wonder if it has to do, and this is like real crackpot theory, but the fact that everybody has access to so much more sports now, right? Before, like, you could see your one game and there's a lot riding on that and you thought about it and then you had rest, but like that game, now I turn the channel, another game. There's nonstop games all the time. And you can stay forever in this heightened adrenaline space of win, win, win. And that Chris Licht, when I said he's a face of white supremacy, because I don't think he's he sees himself as that. We see in the article, like he's critical of Trump. He actually wants to challenge Trump. But part of how white supremacy is thriving is if you're winning at any cost, and any cost includes having a Trump town hall like that, right? And any cost also includes putting a junior reporter, like everyone we have to say, first of all, from the Daily Caller, but even leave that aside, comes from right, but maybe she's good, right? Why do we think, how old is she? 30? A 30-year-old reporter
Caitlin
is
Collins.
ready to tangle with a guy who has taken down so many folks, right? But that's winning because we're going to put he set her up. It was sort of like, here comes a slow pitch, Trump. I'm going to put a good-looking woman.
Yep.
You get ready because the crowd is going to love it when you call her nasty. And they're going to love it because she's a good-looking woman, right? Because this is going to be the explosion of misogyny. And that's going to be ratings gold. And I won. And I want to take Trump down. But, man, all there is winning. Well, and I wonder how much this is just jock culture coming to take over everything.
Yeah, we always have to fight against that. Well, the bottom line is, like, who was it? Like, said everything Trump touches dies. Like, Chris Licht has Trump do that town hall. And it's the end of Chris Licht and the end of CNN to a certain extent. They're getting killed in ratings as a result. Like, it didn't help them. It helped them that one night. And then he's done, probably. His career is damaged, and CNN's brand is damaged as a result because you don't do that. You don't platform that guy because he'll kill you.
I mean, how could you have done it, right? Pete, could you have done it?
Moderated that?
Yeah. Serious question. I mean, obviously it's never going to happen, but
because
is there a way to do it?
No, because the reason why you don't platform certain people is because they're not in good faith. They're not arguing in good faith. Like, you can't beat him at that game because you can't play that game. They knew, and I would know, that if I stand next to him, he's going to say things that aren't true over and over and over. And I can say that's not true and even argue the facts, but it won't matter. It would never matter who's standing next to him as long as he's there perpetuating lies. And you know he's going to do that because he always has done that. Then it doesn't matter who's standing next to him. It doesn't matter. You know, if anything, I would argue to allow Trump to be on your air, the only way you can do it is via tape. It has to be on tape so that you can fact check it. You can't platform
and then say, okay, now we're going to, here's the thing he said. Now we're going to show you. Same reason why I always said, you know, go on Fox News, but only if it's live, especially with like Tucker Carlson, who they can't do that to you. Right.
Yeah. So they can't do that to you as well. Because Tucker used to always do that, taped interviews and then add them up and destroy a person's life. So
right.
That's the way.
You know, I mean, like, you know, Trump always uses Elton John at his rallies. And like, when you're saying that standing, you're right. It's an Elton John song. I'm still standing. As long as Trump is standing, as long as he is present, he wins because he has framed the narrative. They're trying to destroy me. And if I exist, then I won. Right.
Yeah.
And that's also, I mean, it's a pretty smart narrative because not only is it just winning, right? Winning is important, but it's also winning. He's sort of, you know, it's like that old movie Rudy. It's like underdog status, right? It's Rocky. That's the frame. I know we scoff, but that's the frame. Like, look, we hear that all the time in his emails. Look at everything they've thrown at me.
It's really hard to see people who have won, who have done, you know, had everything as victims, but they're able to do it. I mean, the simple idea that white people overwhelmingly believe now that they're more discriminated against or victimized than black people is, I don't know what else we need to know. That's always been the stat that has concerned me the most. How can you?
That's as old as the country, and that goes back to, you know, the genocide of indigenous folks, and that is the kind of, look, this is the invention of whiteness because there are no white people, right? That's an invention. That's an imaginary construct, right? The English and the French were not saying white people. They're, you know, the English and the Spaniards were not saying white people. They were saying you're inhuman and we're the real people, right? But they construct this whiteness against indigenous people and everything that they're doing. You know, look at this. You Little House on the Prairie, right? Little House on the Prairie. Everyone remembers Little House on the Prairie, which is becoming increasingly acknowledged as what it was, sadly, which was a very right-wing text created by a not quite fascist, but, you know, 1930s, tiptoeing right up to it.
It was books before this show, in case anybody didn't know, right?
Yes. Michael Landon, he's good. He's all right.
All right. You're not indicting Michael Landon.
The books, you know, the first book, I believe, repeats several times, only good Indian is a dead Indian, that kind of stuff. But the idea is also that the white people are always in danger of extermination, that they're just trying to be on their land. And at any moment, so that, I mean, we call it projection, but that flipping of white grievance is as old as the country goes. It is what you can't be white until you do it, right? Until you make that move, then you're just whatever little fractured person you are.
Last question for you is about a tweet that you wrote a few hours before we started talking that I can't retweet enough. You wrote, a big problem with political reporting right now is that so many political reporters believe an individual can either be kind and generous in their daily sphere or a supporter of fascist movement built on hate. This is banal and naive. Many are both. I mean, flesh that out a little bit with, you know, an example or whatever.
It was doing a response. Someone else had tweeted something about, I can't remember which NPR reporter talking about how the people he meant covering Trump in 2020 were not filled with hate. They were just very nice people. And look, the people in my book, The Undertow, are nice product placement there. In my book, The Undertow, here it is. And that's your cue to hold up, Pete. There it is. The owner of that knife is a very nice person. Ashley Babbitt, she wasn't actually so nice. She was a decent person at one point in her life, and I think that's overlooked. And I think we're now tempted toward the same kind of fascist thinking that you are essentially democratic or essentially fascist. But the reality is of course, lots of folks are drawn to fascism because they are kind and generous folks in their sphere.
To me,
and if you encounter them in their sphere on their territory, they will be nice to you. Even if, like me, like with Nazi Ralph, well, you're half white, Jeff, so I'll talk to you. Or they imagine themselves non-racist. A black guy, the way the Proud Boys is a multiracial group, right? You show up in that space, they're going to be kind and generous. Part of the allure of fascism is that they feel that their sphere is threatened, the space in which they can be kind and generous. So for us to make that conflation, and I see it all over, not just in liberal leftists, too, imagining that all fascists must be, cackling monsters, and then like, oh, look, I've been to so many Trump rallies with my heart issues. I always worry, like, good God, what if I have a heart attack at a Trump rally? And then I think this is a great place to have a heart attack. There are so many dudes here. So there are a lot of first responders. There are so many dudes who live their lives so eager to help in an emergency. It's going to be a contest to who's going to CPR me and get me out of there. And then they're going to vote for the laws. They're both.
Are you going to be conflicted in your work and in your opinions when your life is saved by a fascist white supremacist who gave you CPR? Are you going to then have to change your opinion on them?
No, my life, when I had the heart attack, I was watching the second Trump-Clinton debate in the hospital on the machine. I can see it. And my nurse, who is a wonderful guy, full Trump supporter. His wife is an immigrant. He and his wife are both nurses. His wife is a Asian American immigrant. And they're Trump supporters. I know he's a Trump supporter. He's watching the Trump. I mean, he is a nice guy. He voted for fascism. And he saved my life too. So, but I didn't say, gosh, well, on the one hand, fascism. On the other hand, it was awful nice of Drew to give me that medicine I needed. So I guess fascism can't be that bad. No, Drew, you're 100% wrong. Good job with the nurse.
I think that the part of this, that's why this tweet.
Look, you named Todd, I've named Drew. This is like,
there we go. Todd and Drew are going down together, probably at the same benefit. The reason why this tweet stuck out to me is because I've been seeing this my whole career, my whole life too, and I'm sure there's a lot of really snappy quotes about it. But it's not how a person treats you one-on-one, or maybe even if they're generous to your family one-on-one, maybe they do something kind and generous to your family. And we get then conflicted by our own kind of sense of who they are and what they've done for me versus what they're doing for the rest of the community. Then this came up recently in my town where I was arguing with a woman who fashioned herself a progressive, but she was allied with the town racist. And I was like, how? She goes, he's always been there for me. And I go, but what about the families that he marginalized? He marginalized his family. I hear that he's done nice things for your family, but can't you separate the two? And you're talking more about it from a point of view of a political reporter. And I think therein lies the problem too. You embed, you cover, you become part of, you have a good relationship with, and now you can't do the job that you need to do, is just to be objective about the damage that they're committing to entire population.
That's the only way you can. I mean, I embed and I'm part of it, and so my subjectivity is there. I think about this woman Diane G. in Florida that I met in the book, and I love her. I actually really like this woman. Yeah. She's a full-on QAnon fascist. We had a great time talking. I understood where her anxiety came from. It came from a real and decent and actually good place, concern for others. But which side are you on? Diane has chosen for fascism. Now, if Diane has a heart attack, she also had heart troubles. I'm going to be there for her. I am going to do everything I can to save her. Your friend can be she can be there for that racist. If he, his power goes out in his house, she can help him, right? She can do whatever. Neighbors being there for each other. That doesn't mean you take their damn side. And I think when I look at political reporters, you have sort of a category of those raised and come from the bubble. So many from Connecticut, New York, and so on. And so when they discover that people outside that bubble don't have fangs, well, if they don't have fangs, they must be sweet. And then there's those who come from conservative backgrounds and they're like, well, I know, my Uncle Dave is a decent, good man. So, and like your Uncle Dave is in his sphere a decent, good man. I mean, how many times do we have to think about good Germans to understand this? And I don't mean that in a belittling way. Oh, how dare you compare my Uncle Dave to good German? Look, there was a lot of good Uncle Friedrichs in Germany, and they were. But Jesus, then they voted.
Yeah. I just feel like it's not we shouldn't be measuring people on how they treat the people they know and their neighbors differently than complete strangers. Like, how do you treat a complete stranger? People used to come into
strangers not the measure, though. I think years ago, my first book, a writer named Peter Manso and I were traveling around writing about varieties of religious experience. And down in Texas, we get involved with a cowboy church. This is a sub-denomination of folks who they have their own cowboy Bible. Everything's translated into cowboy vernacular. Where you might find a picture of Jesus, this church had a big painting of a steer. The pastor was an old rodeo guy and a rancher, and everything is done this way. So we spend a lot of time with him, and he's a good rancher. Man, he loves these animals. In fact, he's torn in his evangelicalism because what if my cows can't go to heaven? I don't want to go to heaven if there's no cows.
Jeez.
But comes the end of the week. It's me and Peter traveling around the country, New York plates. He says, boys, coming up Sunday, says something I've been not wanted to talk to you about, but I just have to. As guests, it would be customary for us to be given a turn in the pulpit. He says, but given how you two boys are, and we realize, he thinks we're a couple. And he's completely homophobic. He's welcomed us into his house. It is giving him great pain. He would rather just pretend he didn't know and let us speak in the pulpit, which we don't want to do. This guy, even a stranger, he welcomed us as strangers, as a gay couple from New York. But what were the homophobic laws that he helped create in Texas, right? That it's not even the neighbor and the friend, it's the stranger. It is systems. Think about fascism as a system. What is a system? What is the machine that you're operating? And your neighbor there, political reporters, pay attention to the machine, not just the little cog.
Well said. American treasure, Jeff Sharlet. Thank you so much for an hour. You gave me an hour. I really appreciate you, man.
You let me rant. Thank you, Pete.
I can't thank you enough for joining me, as always.
All right. Take care, Pete.
All right, bub. All right, there you go. Jeff Sharlet. How about it? Go say hello to him on Twitter. I forgot to plug that earlier. And let him know that you heard him here on the show. Always a pleasure to get him on. And I hope that you love that as much as I loved talking to him. Sharlet, Sharlet, if you want to look it up on Twitter or on other social media, and check him out. Get his book, so good. Most recently, The Undertow, Scenes from a Slow Civil War. And that's what I've got for you today, ladies and gentlemen. I am done for this episode. Go see John Carroll, by the way. He's down on tour in Texas and Albuquerque, New Mexico. He's going to be in Tucson, Arizona. Check out all of his dates, as always, at johncarroll.org. But before I throw it to John, I just want to remind folks, and I don't know who needs to hear this, but you matter. You are important. Your presence along here with us on this earth, it does make a difference. It does to me, because you're listening, and for whatever reason, doesn't matter. It means you mean something to me. So thank you. You do make a difference. Your presence is important, and you matter. All right. I love you. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Now you can take us away, John Carroll.
Stand up, stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge. Let the weak flee. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a for your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. And you can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.